Okay, we are live.
Are we ready to just kick it off then, Blair?
Yeah, might as well.
All
Oh,
right. Well, welcome everybody. Go ahead and share a couple announcements before we kick it off. Um, Hopefully this is working. You guys can see my screen, right?
yes.
Mhm. Okay. All right. So welcome to tonight's Blair Dunkley experience. A couple things before we kick it off. Just a reminder that Blair has a couple books on Amazon, Ultimate Mind Hacking and the Phobia Freedom Formula. There are QR codes on your screen. If you're out there on YouTube and you would like to get direct access to those, you can just hold up your phone, scan it, and it will take you directly to those books and you can add it to your cart. Highly recommend that you read those again, especially if you're new to mind models or if you want to go deeper with them. They're a great way to see the utilitarian effectiveness of what mind models are and how they work with how they're more effective than mindset and how you may be thinking about things and how mind models specifically can help you become more effective. Also, Blair has a gift for those who are participating in the Blair Dunkley Experience, the Mind Mastery magazine. Again, recommend that you grab that. It's a beautifully done document that gives a little bit more context on what mind models are and again how they can be used to help you become more effective. If you are on YouTube and you would like to join us live, we would love to have you here with us. You can go to rewiringthemind.com/weekly webinar or the QR code on the right-hand side of your screen. Go ahead and scan that. And what that will allow you to do is sign up to join us here live. You'll be able to have access to the Zoom link where you can participate with us here in the room, ask your questions, and be part of the experience. With that, we'd like to officially welcome you to the 396th episode of the Blair Dunkley Experience. This is our mind model community where we discuss mind models. Now, if you're not familiar, mind models are a collection of extensively tested thought frameworks, skills, and behaviors that enable people to transform their lives intentionally. They were researched and tested for 17 plus years, and mind models are consistently proven to work 80% of the time. Mind model definitions are behavioral, not academic. This is the only work that we've found that Blair has done that allows you to get more specific and more nuanced to get greater yield on success. They are process-based, and for this reason, we lean into the experiential piece. Regardless of how long you work with mind models, there is more depth to explore. Even Blair himself experiences this with his own work after 50 years. Your host for this evening is Blair Dunkley, the creator of Mind Models. I am Becky Graff, your co-host and certified mind model method coach, along with amazing Patty McClurg. And the Blair Dunkley experience is Blair's free gift to you. It's an opportunity to learn, experience, and practice mind models in a safe, real-world environment. For me personally, mind models have impacted every part of my life and my husband's. In business, it's helped me become more effective and confident in my husband and I's marriage. They've helped us resolve an 8-year challenge within a couple hours. And then when we lost both of our young daughters in a tragic accident in 2020, these tools gave us the strength to navigate the grief and PTSD and the capacity to recover more quickly than we ever thought possible. Mind models have increased our effectiveness, resilience, and ability to keep moving forward without traditional counseling. And we really look forward to learning with you tonight and welcome you to the BDE. And with that, Patty, I believe it's over to you for leftovers.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to give you an idea of what we're doing and what we're in the middle of, we've done a foundational series 1, which had 10 episodes dealing with mind model awareness and language foundations, where we covered one mind model per week to break it down as a foundational series. Blair has at the beginning of each one of these a summary video, which is very helpful and easy to access, only takes about 5 minutes. We are in the beginning of our series 2. So series 2 is the behavioral correction and self-regulation. And tonight, our show on assumptions and the big ASK, that is the first of series 2. So leftovers, last week we did the mind model, ask versus tell. And our practice experience was asking effective questions to influence ourselves or others. I even offered the idea of listening to a sitcom or a show, something that would let you see what other people are doing with asking and telling. So I don't know, is Brent, are you able to participate tonight? or is he just listening, or is he able to
Yeah, I
participate?
can you hear me?
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
can participate.
I can hear you. Is it possible to increase your volume at all?
Let's see. I know. What's this output? Like this? Is that
I
on the
can barely hear you.
Yeah,
okay? There's the audio section on here on
There
the
you
Zoom.
there
go.
we go.
There you go.
Okay. Is that
There
better?
you go.
Yes,
Yes.
much.
Okay.
So, did you do the practice with effective questions, or did you listen to a sitcom? What did you experience with the ask versus tell observations last week?
Yeah, I attempted to watch a show with it and put it there, but I believe it was a drama show, so it was a lot more of there was a lot of telling going
Okay.
on to create conflict and one side or the other. There wasn't a whole lot of questioning for understanding and alignment.
I'm
But
curious, in what you watched,
yeah,
did the telling create the interpersonal conflict in the drama, or did the telling move the story forward?
hmm, I didn't look at it that way, but I think it moved the story forward, even
Okay.
though it did. It was almost as if it was one of those like fillers just to make it move quicker. Like, hey, it was a point
Okay.
to tell, and it was like this because
Hmm.
if you were to ask the questions and figure it out, it would take a longer
Okay.
portion of the tell. So that may be maybe the purpose as well too. But it also does create the drama, the telling, the like an authority almost
Uh-huh.
too. You're trying to create that separation of two people. One is above the other, that impression of
Okay.
that without telling like where they're standing. So you get that
Okay.
from that person. That's what I picked up from the show, like the positions. It was like I think like a job position too. So it
Okay.
was like one was more higher than the other, so it was more of a telling down to the other person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, there was some questions, but there was a lot of why questions too. And I noticed that there wasn't a whole lot of questions using what. It was more of
Okay.
why.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, that
Interesting.
was interesting.
Well, thank you, Brent.
Well,
Shannon, can I ask you what your observations were?
I was reflecting on the movie that I watched, and there weren't a whole lot of questions in that movie either. I was just like scanning through it in my mind. There was a great example at the beginning of the movie, Blair, of your "for now" comment from last week. There was like this wonderful moment. I was like, haha, that's literally that whole conversation right at the beginning of the movie. The hero has a "for now" moment. Um, but the conflict was mostly centered around past, future, and there weren't a lot of questions asked by anyone. It was loads of telling. It was a military movie, so that's also just part of that, like in our video from last
Mhm.
week. But um, finding how they created alignment through their behaviors, and the questions would have been asked internally that created that alignment. Like, when all hope is lost, what might I do about this? Like, there's a creative out of the box, response to those things. But in the dialogue of the film, it was all very actions speak louder than words. And if there are words, that is the conflict, because it's tell, tell, tell. So that's what
Because
I that's what I noticed. But yeah, it is interesting, um, that the type of effective questioning we learn here isn't really super featured in that type of, you know,
right,
it's it's not forward. Resourceful questioning is not forward in entertainment.
that is true. However, since I watched that movie with you, there were a great number of assumptions in the movie. And so our topic for tonight is assumptions and the great ASK. ASK is an acronym that stands for Assumptions Stop Knowing. And it encourages us to remember that we ask questions to clarify assumptions. So I'm going to pass it to Blair. Would you like to do your video overview?
Absolutely. I'm just going to share the video, and you've actually given me a great segue into the clip itself. So I think you guys can see this okay. Is that correct?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm just going to play it then. I don't know how come that's not playing. There.
The greatest risk to human communication is a blind spot, the state of not knowing what you don't know. Every second, your brain receives a continuous, overwhelming stream of sensory input. To process this volume, your neurology acts as a severe filter, dropping large amounts of information it categorizes as non-priority. Because you lack all the facts in any given moment, the brain relies on your past experiences to bridge the gaps. This automatic fill-in-the-blanks mechanism is an assumption. Without this mechanism, completing basic daily tasks would be impossible. You don't need to verify how a door works every time you encounter one. The danger arises when we mistake these auto-filled patterns for verifiable reality. The neurology relies on data chunking. Recalling a memory changes its physical structure. The brain exaggerates emotional details and deletes what's unimportant. This chart shows staged crime demonstrations. Eyewitness accuracy drops to 30%. Up to 25% create phantom memories, recalling events that never happened. Ineffective assumptions occur when an individual treats these highly subjective opinions or altered memories as facts. They enter a state of rigid certainty. Effective assumptions occur with conscious awareness. You acknowledge you are acting on incomplete data to make a necessary choice, then immediately run it through a testing loop to see if you are right. Treating an assumption as fact creates an illusion of control that stops the learning process. To manage these hidden filters, we apply the ASK mind model. ASK stands for Assumptions Stop Knowing. Let's run a test scenario. Listen to this seemingly straightforward statement. I woke up, I went downstairs, and had breakfast. Freeze your mental image of that scene. Write down what you actually know for a fact from that single sentence, and then list what your brain just assumed. Let's look at the hidden facts. Did you picture morning, afternoon, or evening? Were you wearing pajamas or office clothes? Was this your house or a hotel? What exactly did you eat? You must externalize the details to verify what is actually real. Applying genuinely curious questioning is the mechanism for doing this, as leading questions only serve to validate existing biases. Think of a specific choice you have to make today where you lack complete information. Let's apply a 3-step deliberate practice. Step 1. Catch your brain auto-filling the information gap. Notice when you feel certainty about something unobserved. Step 2. Stop the process. Acknowledge the assumption is not a verified fact. Step 3. Formulate one curious question. Ask it aloud to verify reality. Keep these core tenets in mind. Brains autofill gaps. Rigid certainty traps us. Conscious awareness tests our choices. Curious questions reveal verifiable facts. You cannot completely eliminate assumptions from your daily life, but by applying the ASK model, you ensure that you stop mistaking past experiences for your present reality.
Well, that's it. Relevant,
Nicely done.
short and sweet. There you go.
Okay, so Becky, take it away.
All right, well, I'm going to pose the question. After watching the video, what is an assumption? We have a small group, so everybody gets to play tonight. Shannon, you came up mute.
An assumption is I'm trying to think back to like my earliest memories of an assumption, and I always learned that they make an ass out of you and me from a very early age. But I if I had to like condense it really short, I think it would be, you know, a self fill-in without any curiosity.
Okay.
Hmm.
Awesome. Jacqueline put in the chat, information true or false. Okay. Patty, what about for you? When you think about an assumption, what's an assumption?
Something that you take for granted as just being true.
Mm.
You don't question it. It just is. And this is just the way it is. And you take that for granted. No questions, just another level of certainty.
And would you say in your experience that that comes pretty easy and pretty fluid assumptions?
Yes, they come much easier than the questions, actually. In order for me to question, I have to realize I'm making an assumption, and I don't always realize I'm making an assumption because I'm so sure it just is the way it is. And it's not until I get new information, I'm like, whoa, that's a new perspective, or, that's something I hadn't thought of, or that's not the way I thought it was. And then I start asking questions. But in the middle of it, in order to ask the questions, you have to be aware you're making an assumption.
Yeah, well said. Brent, are you in a position that you could come off mute and share any additional thoughts you have on assumptions?
Yeah, they're well, basically, I learned that they're fill-ins, basic from the past. That's what, like Patty's, in my experience, it was before was something I know for sure because it happened before. So I push that forward, and that it is happened without questioning if that's true or not. That's is what based off of something that has happened, and that's what the video had explained was you're filling in gaps based off of past experiences in those times where you don't have all the information.
Yeah.
So, but then holding that as like Patty is true, and that is certain, that is what it is without questioning it. That's where it can get you in trouble. And that, I've experienced that as well. Something completely different would happen. You're like, oh, I this is going to happen. Nope, it's something different because the situation is different, different time, different inputs. So the outcome's a little bit different.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Brent. So the
Becky, I also was thinking while Brent was talking about how story plays into assumptions and the role that a particular bend or empathy or sympathy or predisposition towards a certain line of thinking can spin the story, and you don't even realize you're being biased. So
Yeah.
that was something that popped into my head too.
Very, very, go ahead, Blair.
I'd like to build on that because, one of the things that we, like Brent mentioned, there was it's fill in from the past, which is quite common. But if you recall the stats there, on the investigative, like police reporting, 25% of the information is invented. Like our brains fill in gaps. It doesn't mean that it is a different view of the same situation. It can be a completely invented scenario, which is the way that our brain chooses to remember, thus creating phantom memories. I mean,
Yeah, I can second that, Blair. I've had experience. I had a first-hand experience with that. I think I explained on here before. I had the interaction with the accident, and then there was videotapes of what was going on. And there's things like I don't recall some of that things that happened that I was doing because I could see myself. And if I were to, they asked me, the lawyers that were interviewing me asked me what I was doing, and I was like, I had to watch the video. I don't know what I was doing. I attempted to answer the question, but I really couldn't tell you. So I had to just say, I don't recall what I was doing, at that moment. And I was like, that seems a bit, you know, and then that was popped in my head. I'm like, well, it's been so long and your memory alters events from the past and it's been a year in advance. I'm like, that would seems like an ineffective question to ask because knowing that would be different than what actually happened. So it seemed as if I was being, as a witness, being trapped into that game of like your credibility, like, oh, you don't remember what you did, so it's not credible. So that's what I got that feeling as well. So I was like, oh my gosh, so am I being attacked almost for something that I was just a part of and not being able to recall something that happened and it wasn't is the small pieces, like these little events in between the big ones, the major ones that I could recall that were very emotions attached to, but those things in between there, the hours in between that interactions with police officers and other people, yeah, I could not tell you. I would have to just, if I really had to answer it and throw, I would have to just throw something out there.
Yeah. And like almost invent it on the
Hmm.
spot. Give a story that is reasonable, but not necessarily the way you recall it, because your brain was, when your brain is actually aware of what's going on, your brain does not necessarily recall um, the data absolutely like a computer or like a video. In fact, the neuroscience on this is on memory is that every single time you recall a memory, your brain modifies that memory to some degree. So just the act of recalling changes the memory. Hence, we get fish stories like that. The fish keeps on getting bigger.
Hmm.
The one that got away, huge. Anyway,
Well, so to that point, like the recall and the information that the brain considers priority, is there, and I don't remember if I think I caught it in the video, something to do with the emotional pieces of that. Is it filtered through the emotional load at all as far as like priority, Blair? Can you speak to that a little
absolutely.
bit more?
So you're going to start looking at everything. Your brain will basically assess the risk to you. So, so that's your primary source of filtering virtually everything. Everything is primarily risk filtered until you're actually in an environment where your brain deems it to be safe. And then all of a sudden you go into full prefrontal lobe, like the executive center of your brain can take over. And the amygdala, the fight, flight, or freeze response is minimalized, always there, always on alert to find something that's not there. But if you've ever been in a room where everything was going normally, I can recall one time I was out in Vancouver in a client's office, and all of a sudden, it was really weird because it was a glass walls, all business walls, like were glass from one office to the next. You could see through three or four offices right to the outside, and sitting in the president's office, I could see this ripple in the earth coming towards us, and it was, what's this? Like it was an earthquake. I'd never been in an earthquake before, and all of a sudden, I could see everything moving and being able to look through the glass and seeing everything, that nothing snapped or broke. It all flexed and folded and did weird things, but nothing catastrophic. But the first moment of that, I was, in awe is what I want to say. Like, just I was discombobulated because I didn't know what was going on exactly. And then all of a sudden I go, this has to be an earthquake, because I could feel it. And the earth, the ground shook, everything shook. And then you're trying to orient yourself to figure out, is there something that is significantly dangerous? And it just went through, and then it was calm again. But it was like three or four waves and then nothing. and everything was back to normal. But that was probably a good 15 minutes of 15 to 20 minutes of just talking about it, feeling the feelings and expressing that. And later on, I found out, okay, that's about normal. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes for your body to burn off the adrenaline. It takes about what, 200 to 300 nanoseconds for your body to light up, like light you up with adrenaline and everything else. And sure enough, it was there, and like 15 to 20 minutes to have it burn off and get back to normal. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that.
I find that so fascinating that it seems to be like how we feel about something really is the driver about what we recall, and that felt sense of being safe. You said deemed, right? So treats everything as a threat unless it deems that it is safe to engage differently, and how that fuels our assumptions.
Mhm.
So thus far we've kind of talked about like the sticky slope and the potential pitfalls of assumptions. But what about effective assumptions? What are your thoughts
Mhm.
on that, Shannon? When might assumptions be effective?
That's a really interesting question. I'm trying to think about that in my job first. Um, gosh. I mean, I can see how, but that's my original answer is really more of a generalization, but maybe we can tease it out from there. But like thinking, when I meet a new client and I don't know anything about them and I have a short amount of time to pull out the most effective exercises and stretches to match with this person, you know, I think that until I get to know them, if they become a regular, you can apply testing and evaluating to the long-term trajectory of working with someone. But right off the bat, if you're trying to help them as much as possible, as fast as possible, you have to make assumptions, common areas of tightness, common areas of, pain, and common things that alleviate those pains. And you go from there because you have to have some place to start to create, the data stream that comes into your brain. And once I make my little educated assumptions and then I start doing things, I can get information and then pivot as I go. Does that fit what you're talking about?
What do you think, Shannon? Does that fit?
I don't know. I think it does. I'm gonna say I think it does, but I would like more examples of effective assumptions
So
because it's
how
a
can
really
you
great.
prove, Shannon, how can you prove that to yourself?
Well, I mean, back in the early days, if you don't do it, it doesn't count, is the first one of the early things you always used to say, and doing
Yep,
things gives you data. And so
exactly.
you
And
have
what
to make
else?
educated assumptions to begin somewhere, and that
But
gives you
when,
data.
okay, but when you make an educated assumption and you test it out, what happens to the assumption?
It's proved
Exactly. So is it
effective or
still
ineffective.
right? But is it still an assumption?
Not at the point when you have new data.
Exactly. So that's where what you were just trying to do with Becky was get an element of reinforcement to your assumption to move it out of being an assumption.
Oh, that's fun.
Did you
That
notice
actually
that?
makes more sense in my story.
Right. But you weren't noticing that, um, that you were doing that. That's how come I wanted to draw this to your attention to
Yep.
say you're actually moving yourself beyond just an assumption by testing.
Okay.
And the second you test it, it's no longer assumption. It's either proven or disproven. That's it.
Mhm.
it either works or it doesn't work.
Yeah. Awesome. No, that was a great little quick. That was a good one.
Good.
Well done, Shannon. And thank you, Blair.
You're
That was
welcome.
an alley-oop. So when we're thinking about effective assumptions, so Shannon, did you get another example?
Another one?
You said you wanted some more examples. Did you get another example?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Now,
So
hold it. So, Shannon, what was the example of an effective assumption?
I guess maybe it wasn't an example of an effective assumption. Maybe what the example was how you turn an assumption into data that you can use.
Hold it, but did I know for a fact? Like, okay, so I'm going to just give you a bit of a hint here. It's not about you, it's about what I did.
Okay.
So, did I do this, whatever I just did with you, based on fact?
I'm gonna make a guess and say yes.
Well, how? Did I confirm anything with you?
Okay, no, I guess so then what I'm calling your education and all of the
But
skills that you have, it's
true.
still an educated assumption.
Exactly. That's all it is. It's a high quality guess.
Mhm.
Okay, but I hold those as guesses, not as fact.
Okay.
I went on a coffee date this morning with a person who happens to be a nurse or a former nurse. She's retired now. And she was referred to as a um, health visitor in England, out of England. And so they have this for when a woman has a child, they get this person called a health visitor who's a kind of nurse educator, like a public health nurse, but basic, but fundamental to making sure that the child's health is well looked after. So, and that's going from birth through to about the age of 4, because children go into kindergarten there at the age of 4, and so they're in the school system. So they're taken care of at that point somewhat differently. Anyway, my point being is that she made quite a number of assumptions about people based on history that she's done. But those were sometimes held as assumptions and sometimes held as fact. But I couldn't figure out how she discerned the difference other than she just decided this is where this person is. This is the background they were. So it was fascinating how she made her or told the story of her discernment of what caused her to behave in sometimes in some situations and not in others, which I found most intriguing. So you learn something new every day. And my point to this is she didn't realize she was doing this. So she would walk into situations and make assumptions without labeling those as assumptions. She would say, I just knew. So you walk in there and you just know. Well, when I was talking with you, Shannon, I didn't just know, but I had a high probability guess that you could figure this out if I asked valid questions or created a scenario for you to self-discover. But I wouldn't know exactly what it is that you were going to discover until you discovered it. Where the practical nurse or the health visitor knew what was going to happen. And you know what? I'm correct a good 80% of the time on my stuff. But that doesn't mean that I know anything until it's confirmed. And the times where things didn't align, she was quite concerned about those individuals not being truthful or not being whatever towards her. So it was interesting that she didn't question her own assumption. She held the other person as in error where she wasn't, until grossly proven that she was mistaken. Anyway, I just found it fascinating.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Blair, because again, assumptions, as the video pointed out, are part of how we behave in life. Like, we need them. But the way we operate with them is the nuance that can help us become more effective. Brent, you put in the chat.
I just wanted, sorry, I just wanted to say one other thing here, is that my little story here was to sort of try and highlight the ASK, the ask, assumptions stop knowing. And so when we make those assumptions, she tended to shut down. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. So Brent put something in the chat that I think is relevant here. Would you care to elaborate on what you put in the chat? Knowingly make
Yes.
an assumption.
Yes. So when Blair was talking about the educated guess, but he knew it was, he labeled it as a guess. So he knows he's assuming, he knows it is, but he's testing it to find out there's a high probability that he could get Shannon to get her to become effective and answer the question way, but he still needed to test it, but he knew what he was doing, knowingly that is what he's doing. And that, so he's not holding it as certain, he's knowing that that's the position that he's filling that in, assuming that this may happen, is high probability it might happen, and then going through with it. And then if it does, then it proves it, and if it doesn't, then it disproves it, like Shannon, like it works or it doesn't work. But knowing that piece, that's that being aware that you're assuming, you must assume in the situation, and then go ahead and go forward with it, knowing that you have to have this piece, and this is where you're at, and then going forward.
I'd like to take a moment and just read out loud the behavioral definition for the assumptions, the mind model behavioral definition for an assumption, because it includes part of what we're talking about here. The act of taken for granted, your perception of what facts might be, forming opinions and taking them as being facts, things accepted as true or certain to happen without actual verifiable proof. And I'm a nurse, I'm not a health visitor, but I'm a nurse in this country. And a lot of medicine is predicated on assumptions.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of medicine. So we look at a certain set of facts and know that we don't really know, but there's a high probability that ... and that impacts what tests you do to prove your assumptions so that they're no longer assumptions. But without knowing sort of the realm of possibility that what you're seeing fits into, you can't make a recommendation. I get people asking me for recommendations, especially on children, and I'll say, well, this is a possibility, and it's a possibility that's worth checking out, because if it is this, you don't want to wait 24 to 48 hours. You don't want to wait until morning if this is what's going on. And most of the time, they come back to me and say, yeah, it was just what you said it was, but I didn't know it was an ear infection in a small child. I suspected it was an ear infection in a small child. Those kinds of things, and just based on my past experience. But
Well,
Um,
yeah, I gotta jump in there and go, based on your past experience and the experience of hundreds of others, like if not thousands of others reporting it, and this giving you a description of symptoms. And that
yeah,
symptomology is a collection of data points that are likely, but not necessarily so. And your knowledge base on that is extensive. So you can make high probability determinations, but they're still just assumptions. They're not
exactly.
fact.
So I'm wondering how that certainly you called them um, symptoms based on a large collection of data points.
Yes.
My brain was just going into that large. Keep going, Mom. I'm curious where you're going with this because I had a
Well,
fly.
I'm wondering how that same model might apply to relationships.
Oh.
Where were you going to go with it, Shannon?
I was just going to go with the larger body of data that's come before you. Does that increase your probability of, accuracy? You know what I mean? With the fact that there are certain things that have massive bodies of data and things that have already come before you,
Right.
and studying those things and learning from those things, just in terms of content and subject matter and the type of assumptions you make. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously, keeping your posture curious and being aware of the testing process and that it is an assumption until it's proven or disproven,
Right.
keeps the process flow like humble and accurate and,
It does,
open
but how
to,
often I still want to explore how this might apply to relationships.
yeah, yeah.
You know, what do you think, Becky? How
I'm
does
giggling over here. I was gonna say assumptions, the core tenet of relationships and communication. So when Brent, you came off mute, what did you have
Oh,
to share?
I accidentally clicked it, but I was
Oh.
thinking the same thing. I was like, okay, so that the amount of data information inputs can affect the accuracy or of the assumption. So like in the case of an ear infection, there's so many large data groups, but the symptoms may be very similar and there's like the number of them. So you're able to point to something that's more highly probable. In relationships, it may be different. You got so many other inputs that can change. So some things may be similar, but there's a couple things that are different, or how they behave one way, somebody behaves. So it may be a little more difficult to, you can throw the assumption in there, but to be more accurate with that would be, I would say, be more difficult. Like the probability, the numbers would be a lot lower. The probability of being accurate with that would be a lot lower. I don't know. It was just the like the size of inputs that are associated with things you're assuming on. So like, oh, the sun's going to come up tomorrow. Like I'm assuming it's going to come up tomorrow, knowing
Mhm.
that it consistently has done that, the information. So that was just an example I was thinking of that popped up when you guys were doing the different ones. I'm like, oh, maybe that's something that's going to affect that and makes it much more difficult when you're assuming to be for it to not work out. Like in the relationships, you're like, oh, I assumed this and that didn't work out because it was based off something that happened before, you information you had before, and it just wasn't. It's not going to work out in this current situation.
Yeah. So there's a lot of wiggle room when we're using assumptions. Lots of wiggle room. Massive amounts of wiggle room.
Yes, and you're wiggling on this one. So back to Patty's question, Becky.
How specifically do assumptions work in the scope of relationships? Was that your original question, Patty?
Yes.
So, in my experience with relationships, when you use that word, the first thing that popped into my head was like coupledom. Okay, so you're with a significant other. How do assumptions play in there? Let's say, that you've been in relationships prior and then you're in a new one. So, fun fact, I was married prior to Tim and I getting together. And when we entered into our relationship, we both had a whole lot of assumptions about male and female behaviors that we had to relearn and clarify. Okay, because my experience and my assumptions based on my historical experience with males, men in general, dating, brothers, dad, like all that kind of stuff, I had kind of some preconceived assumptions about how that all rolled out. And same thing from Tim's world. And then we were both dating other people, and those assumptions got like thrown out the window and stomped on a little bit. And then we got together and the same thing presented itself. So assumptions in communication, specifically in relationships, close relationships, sometimes are the ones that require a little bit more finesse and a little bit more intentionality in clarification so you don't get stuck. Because it's very easy when you're in a close relationship with somebody and you're having your own narrative, your own assumption running, and they've got their own assumption running over here, that it's going to be like oil and water, unless both parties slow down a little bit and start asking a few more intentional, curious questions about whatever's presenting. Did that answer your question, Patty?
Yeah, you're in the ballpark. You're in the frame.
I'm in the frame.
You're in the frame. You're in the frame. Blair, how do assumptions play out for you in relationship?
Well, it played out this morning on my coffee date. When you try to find out about somebody, and they're great at sharing their stuff, but they're not all that. And I'm quiet, I'm listening, I'm not sharing. Well, I am sharing and whatnot. And they go, okay, so what about this area of your life? And I fill them in. So what turns your crank? And then I'm totally honest that getting my mind models out is something I'm incredibly passionate about, and will be for quite some time. By the way, good news. Yesterday, I had a breakthrough on phobia freedom formula. I got AI to learn how to do a phobia fixer in text format, but it worked. So now can I turn that text format into voice? So that's an exciting moment for me. I've spent quite a while on getting that to this point to make it, connect the dots, as it were. And so talking with somebody who is very disinterested or moderately disinterested in a person's life work, or shows no interest, I should say. I didn't ask, are you interested or disinterested? Didn't ask, but didn't demonstrate any obvious interest in my passion. Is that somebody that I want to invest in and figure out if, things didn't click? And that's completely okay. She's fully retired. She is really invested in her grandkids. I don't have grandkids. If I did, maybe it would change things. But, that's just me for now. So we'll see. And so, you make some assumptions, but you go, what happens when things click? People get fascinated about each other, and they get fascinated about almost everything that the other person does. And it's holding that level of curiosity and clarifying assumptions that, to me, makes relationships intriguing, interesting, and just figuring out what's there, and figuring out where they want things to go and what they might do to attempt to move themselves in that direction going forward. And where are they now with this? So anyway,
Interesting.
it is.
So part of the challenge with assumptions is that you don't know what you don't know.
Yep.
So you don't know that you don't know it if
Mhm.
you don't know what you don't know. and allowing that space for not knowing what you don't know. I remember my grandfather, when I would go places, take him places, he would always take a cane. And it wasn't because he needed the cane for balance or anything, but he had a heart situation, and they weren't doing open heart surgery at that point in world's history. So he would go very slowly up steps, and he would two-step the steps to make sure he slowed himself down. And people would get very annoyed, and he was aware of their annoyance at him. But if he carried a cane, people weren't annoyed anymore. They made the assumption that his behavior then made sense to them because he had a cane.
Yep.
So he would always carry a cane whenever we went someplace. And he was a scientist, and so he was using the power of assumption to work for him.
Yes.
They weren't his own assumptions, but they were assumptions he knew other people would make. And they did, and it worked for him.
Mm-hmm.
I use my own level of that when I go to the gym. I have this look on my face that says, "Do not approach on pain of death."
I have one of those.
But it works very well, right? Everybody sees your face. They're like, "Oh, I assume that if I approach, things will not go well." It wasn't a cane, but I do have one of those faces, Patty. I appreciate this share.
Is
So
that
you
what,
have
is that
the two
what-
assumptions
Say
there.
that again,
You
Brent.
have the two sides of the assumptions, the two sides, the assumptions of the two sides.
Yes.
You're assuming that if you put on this face that no one will approach you, and highly likely that that will happen. But it's still an assumption until you do it and
Yep.
test it out. But then, on the other side, like they assume that you're going through something or they don't want to approach you. So they're assuming something else is going on. I'm not going to approach you.
So in my world, that's a highly effective assumption duality. That model works well for me. But
Brent, do you find that you use assumptions the way we've been talking about? Using the power of what other people might assume?
Oh, and that's, I'd have to think on that a little more. I can't recall something that comes up the top of my head, but I, if I did, I would say that I have sometimes before used it to that extent. But yeah, you know, I think I resonate with your picture of your grandfather too, because I've done that sometimes. Like, hey, on the outside, on the other side, like, hey, what is going on with this thing? Is something's happening? I'm not quite sure. But then, like, if you take a second and think, like, oh, there might be something else going on that I can't see.
Mm-hmm.
But at first, the first glance is a judgment of what the heck is going on here, you know, like I'm in my own thing and it's causing a hiccup for me.
Yeah.
It's a problem for me. It's not, I'm not thinking about them, like what's going on with them. There may be something else. It's about me. So thinking about if it's them, maybe there is something going on.
Mm-hmm.
What it might be. So you're not asking questions. I'm not asking questions. I'm just assuming that I'm certain that I'm right and go ahead and do that. That happens sometimes driving. You're like, what the heck's going on? Like something happens. You're like, I don't know what the heck that was, but it seemed like it might have been intentional, even though it may not have been, but it may have been real risky or close. You're like, what the heck is going on? So you get the little assumption that they're doing something on purpose, and it may not be. They just may not be aware of some of their surroundings. They may have missed something, that they may be doing something else. There may be something else going on. But yeah, so I get that, like that side. So it's but I can see how that definitely works, and it reminds me of almost like playing chess. You're thinking about your moves, but the moves of your opponent as well, and you're doing so. If I do this, and then they're highly likely that they're going to do this move, behave like that. So you're making that move, so it works out. It
Mhm.
works out for both of you, in those situations.
Yep. In the dating world, I'm tending to make some of those moves um, proactively in front of issues. People don't like my pictures up on the dating site, and I've been accused of being a scammer or a con artist a significant number of times where my pictures can't be real. So I have sent selfies if given an opportunity that are in the moment. And I sometimes become proactive with some people and let them know that if they would like, they can check out my books online. That's me, so that they know I'm not a scammer. Number one. Number two, they can get a picture of me instantly. I'll just send them a current selfie if they're in need. And that usually disarms most people, and some say yes and say, yeah, I need to know this. And then well, anyway, it's just there. It's just how life is these days. So, um, at least
Yeah.
my life is.
Oh, I just thought about it once. I do like things I wear, clothes I wear to different places or out and about. Like if I just want to be comfortable for me, the impression that puts on and how people are reacting to it. The same
Hmm.
thing as like Becky, like am I, and if I'm getting a response, like how do I look? What am I doing? Like my mannerisms, my features, am I being super serious? Am I being welcoming and open? So so I have done that, Patty, is like using the way I assumptions for me to affect the assumptions of what those might be for others as well.
What kind of
Yeah.
reception do you get when you make those different choices with your facial, your body language and the way you dress? What kind of reactions do you get?
I mean I know I've been can be it's like I've done the serious. It was be more standoffish. Like I'm in a situation. It just seems to be no one coming around. So okay, I maybe I think maybe it's me being more serious and uncomfortable. So putting on like a an uncomfortable situation to like protect myself. So like well be more open, ask questions, smiling. Smiling and being excited. Putting that on so then it welcomes people and you start chatting with people, like talking. So I'll take the step and go and like start a conversation
Hmm.
just to have that because sometimes people are hesitant just because they're uncomfortable, but then it opens up right away, and I tend to relax in doing that because I'm not sure what the response is going to be. So still kind of you put up a shield just in case you get rejected, but when it goes the other way, it's relaxing, and then that carries on, and that continues on. Like I've done that like at parties or that I don't know a lot of the people, and it ends up opening up like it the rest of the night. So, and I've done the same opposite, like stand off to the side and just be by myself and stay by myself, and that's what I get. That's all that stays that way.
Interesting. Thanks for
Yeah,
sharing.
yeah, and the clothes I wear, I mean, I get like if I'm more relaxed, casual, like t-shirts and jeans, it's just more comfortable. It's more utilitarian. I can do whatever things I get. And then if I wear nicer clothes, khakis or dress slacks, button up shirt, tend to get more compliments. You know, you look nice, you look good, you're handsome, those compliments. But on the other way, I don't I don't get those with the if I'm just being casual and comfy.
Mhm.
I am curious. As you guys were talking, thank you for sharing, Brent. Like, there's so many nuances with how we behave with assumptions. One that popped up for me is it's a work in progress. I have this assumption with time. I assume I have all this time for all these things. And I assume, because I'm a great logical thinker, that if I do all these things in a very specific order, it's going to work out beautifully. Anybody else? Is that just me? Shannon, you're smiling. Okay. I was gonna say, I know
I was
someone
gonna
else.
say,
Yes, you do. Yes,
I
you
wrestle with
do.
my assumptions on time all the time. I have too much time. I don't have enough time. I don't have time for this. I do have time for that. All of those are assumption based. We can't really know how long anything is going to take.
Yeah, especially in line for coffee. It's like I've got 45 minutes. It's enough time to drive in. The drive-through usually takes about X amount of time, so I'll be back plenty of time. That one's bit me in the butt more than once. You'd think I'd learn. Okay.
I think that keeping, we haven't talked about process flow in a while, and that mental picture, Blair, of you pouring water into a glass or
Right.
moving that. But I feel like there's a nice rhythm you could get in with your assumptions if you hold them in an open hand and your mind is in that, like the part of the video that had the loop, like, yes, we're testing, where if you stay in the present and you
Mhm.
can keep a process flow going, it allows you to pivot based on the new data instead
Mhm.
of holding on to what you had either hoped or assumed the data would be. Like, yes, I get through the Starbucks line in this amount of time, and that I can still do these things after. I have that with my classes. I was like, oh, it won't take me this long to teach this particular thing. I can still do all these three things I had planned. And, to update and accept. Yes, indeed, this particular thing took longer than I had anticipated. And to keep the process flow moving smoothly, I have to accept things as they are in the present and as they really are, not as I wish them to be.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
I
true.
get that too. I do the same things. And I've learned if I assume that it's going to take longer than I expect, then it usually gives me a buffer just in case something happens. And it more often than not, it works out that way that it takes longer than I have expected, that I thought it would, that I expected it would be. So that assumption turned out to be accurate.
Mhm.
Well-use version of assumptions.
Mhm.
Okay, assume that if I buffer an extra time, then it will be spot on. So again, assumptions are such a powerful part of, like, we can't function without them, as the video is talking about, because it fills in stuff. But the piece to remember as we're talking through things, like how do we work with them more effectively, which is the behavioral antidote to assumptions is the ASK. So assumptions stop knowing unless we test first. But we have to have something formulated to test.
Yep.
And one of the lines that we prepped, I was going to put in the chat, is we don't need to know everything about everything. Patty, we don't know what we don't know what we don't know. And we don't need to know everything about everything. So again, the assumption that we have to have all of this data before we behave is also a danger zone. We just need to know enough to move forward
Also an
effectively.
assumption.
It is an assumption. Okay. So like they're all over there. But what we can do is have enough data to then test it
Mhm.
so that we're not operating strictly off of the assumptions. We now have knowing to a degree. But that
Mhm.
knowing to a degree is still not the whole thing. It's knowing to a degree.
Right.
Or having an assumption that's close enough to the present, to the now, to be able to test it. And so when we make an assumption, can we test that assumption and turn that into an experience to find out, is that an assumption or is that testable to find out a determination? like what I did with Shannon earlier. I didn't know her answer, but I knew she'd asked the question. And because she did not state it when I re-asked it differently, she didn't recognize that she probably has her own answer. Then I asked her to answer her own question, and she did, and was able to have a self-discovery. Not exactly what I thought it was, but close. So,
Interesting.
but it's close to now. Is there enough data points close to the present moment to be able to move forward? And that's one of the things that I'm doing with my like AI and building this. I don't know dick about AI, but I'll tell you right now, I know that I can ask questions, I can get it to help, I can cause it to evaluate and tell me gaps that I have in my process. And then I can ask it to help me move forward and to identify processes to move forward. I actually am using one AI to write prompts for another AI to move that one forward and build everything that way. So that's my model. So I don't need to know, I just have to be curious enough to get one AI to help me build another AI. So anyway.
It's an interesting process. I
Yep.
think we're ready to move to wrap up.
I think
So, Brent, would you mind starting us off with the wrap up tonight?
Yes, thank you. Um, I found this very interesting. I know a small group, so we had a little more conversations, but the digging into assumptions on how their effective use of them, knowing, but getting to know that you're going to have assumptions and they're everywhere because you can't have all the information, all know everything about everything. So you're going to have assumptions, but knowing that you do and being able to notice that and then question that or continue it to move forward with just enough and knowing that there's still an assumption there is effective, that you're still able to move forward and then uh, figure out and test and figure out, see if that's still accurate or if that works for you. So
Mhm.
that's there. And even like surprising, like small assumptions, the really small detailed pieces that you just automatically pick up, and even though they seem so small, that they're not usually at the forefront of the awareness. So they take a little more of digging. Like the video was, what did you pick up from what you told? It was like, oh, the small things that just you fill in, those are assumptions, and they could be the bigger ones, they're right up front, and then the small pieces, you're like, oh, yeah, that was an assumption. It's just something automatically filled in, but it wasn't at the forefront of what you were filling in. It just kind of came in, and that's what happened. Um, yeah, I this one I had fun with this one. This was really enjoying for me. So I give it a 9.5.
Thank you, Brent. Shannon, would you like to participate tonight in the wrap up?
Yes, ma'am. I liked beginning that statement early on, how we feel about something as the driver for what we recall. That's a new perspective. And then as we continued the conversation, I started to think about looking at assumptions from the self other situation Venn diagram and how assumptions, you know, I can make assumptions about myself. I can let uncomfortable things stop me from doing something, and testing it tells me where my own edges are. Or maybe it is, testing a new body posture or tone or a new way of dressing or a new activity or something, to see where my, where I am. And the same thing, with another person. And just the one thing I don't know that we covered that popped into my head, and maybe we did, that came into my head was checking out an assumption with another person. Like if you have an experience with someone and you're, because I've done this before, where I'm aware of my own, tendency to fill in an area is there. And so to go to a person, it's easier with people you have some trust built up with, but be like, hey, you know, is this what you intended to say? Because this is how I took that. Is that how you meant it? And the power of, so looking at it from like, what are areas of self, and then the other, and then situation. I've had a variety of new interpersonal dynamics come up at work because we opened a new location. It's a completely different demographic. And I was relaying something to my boss, and she's like, she stopped me. She's like, you have to be very careful. She's like, you weren't there. Two different clients are telling you two different things, and you weren't there. So you can't just assume because one person's story resonates with you more than the other person's. You have to, in a sense, put yourself in the Switzerland and in the situation. How can you be effective in that so that it's, radiating as much kindness and positivity as possible so that both clients feel heard and accepted and we can move forward. And so there's just really, I tried it on through the SOS lens as people were talking, and I started to think of new things. And so that's one that always adds another dimension to it that I really enjoy. And just at the end of the day, like some of that pressure that builds up in that tension in my chest, like if I just ask, hey, I noticed your tone is getting a little tense. Are you upset with me? Or did I do something I didn't realize I did? Oh, no, I've had blah, blah, blah. Or yeah, this one thing, something, just that question takes so much. It's like a pressure release valve. It takes so much off because then it creates, and I think it builds the foundation for increased trust because you can discuss those things, you know, in a pretty process oriented way that I think shows a level of care for the other person because you're not coming at it with what you think. It's back to the beginning, how I felt about something, and then I'm checking it out, and then okay. So the connection between the emotions and then the different perspectives of self and others and situations, I thought. And then I really liked at the end, Becky, you put in the chat, we don't need to know everything about everything. We just need to know enough to move forward effectively. And I'm going to throw in last week's thing for now, just for now. There's so much I've loved, literally. That has been like my new mantra for I don't know what, but just, for now, for right now. And life feels a little bit more doable for right now when I say it like that. So um, it's a 8.5 for me tonight.
Thank you, Shannon. Becky, would you like to give you a wrap up?
Yes. I'll go with a 9.25. I love digging into assumptions. And it's interesting as I've been kind of ruminating for myself, like how often are they at play and under the surface and like the micro things. So, similarly, Shannon, like you're working with other people and they do or say something and you, okay, operating as if, and it's been interesting for me over the years of learning about assumptions to start with, kind of where my how do I know phrase came from. It's because it's that knee-jerk desire for certainty that I have to like, but how do I know? How do I know that that's what they meant? How do I know that's what's going to happen? How do I know anything unless I test it first? And simple things like words, like singular words or like a tiny sentence that somebody says, I assume it means what it means in my brain and off to the races. And then all of a sudden things start getting a little bit haywire and sideways. And it's like, okay, there's obviously not clarified specifically enough for this. And I would say that historically, probably 99% of all my disappointments or frustrations in life are due to assumptions that were not tested or expectations that were tied to those that were not clarified first. And then I got myself all up in a dither and made all sorts of stories in my own head that fueled the more assumptions down the rabbit hole of whyness we go, versus slowing down and asking, okay, what do I know about this, like actually externally verifiable or communicated with another person, and then operating off of that versus the story. So thank you guys for participating and playing tonight.
Mhm.
Thanks, Becky. Blair, would you like to share your wrap up?
Absolutely. Assumptions are great, very handy for reflecting on my day, and my week thus far, although it's just been yesterday and today for the week, but very handy on looking at my life through the lens of assumptions and what assumptions I'm utilizing that are stopping me from knowing, and then assumptions today that I'm hearing happening that I start actively testing and clarifying. So that was fun. That was interesting and enlightening. So very useful. Um, so a solid 9 today for me.
Thank you, Blair. As we were sitting here, my mind is going over more and more places where assumptions are a starting point.
Hmm.
And we never really talked about assumptions being a starting point, but what I was recalling, Blair, was how the assumption that mindset theory, the assumption that mindset theory works so well
Yep,
until they actually tested it
that's right.
and found that it worked, what was
One,
it, less
one,
than
no, 1% of the time at best,
1% of the time,
at
that
best.
mindset theory worked 1% of the time.
And in some cases, it was negative 12%.
Yeah,
It,
negative 12.
yeah,
So all of this investment in a different type of coaching that all, surrounds this way of thinking and encouraging other people to think that is not effective and has been proven that way. But for decades, it was assumed to be the way to do things. And a lot of certainty was invested in that.
oh yeah,
And, I was thinking within science, there's a difference, with the hypothesis. Everything starts with a hypothesis, which is the question based on an assumption
hmm,
that you're testing. Everything in science is that way, based on an assumption that you're going to clarify with testing. So assumptions are pretty powerful things in our lives.
yep.
I've enjoyed this discussion a tremendous amount tonight, and I give it a 9. So with that, Becky, I'm going to send it over to you for the practice experience and the outro.
Yes. So practice experience, you guys, to bring back next week is noticing what you or others are making assumptions out of and deliberately challenge it with asking effective, curious questions, and then notice what happens with your experience. So again, as we've discussed, assumptions show up everywhere. Like if I'm going to put red pepper flakes on my pizza, it's going to taste so much better. And then I did it and I'm like, oh, that was a really sad choice. I didn't like it. Okay. It can be all over the different, lots of different places, but start paying attention to that and kind of see what falls out for you. So again, notice you or others making an assumption and deliberately challenge it with asking effective, curious questions. What do you notice and what was your experience? Shannon, I don't know what that is. Aleppo?
Aleppo. I didn't
I-
probably spell it right, but Aleppo pepper. Go into the World Spice Market and buy some Aleppo pepper.
I will have to Google that. I don't know what that is, but I will Google it
It's
because it
the
sounds
only kind
interesting.
of red pepper flake you'll ever need in your whole life.
I was going
Oh
to say,
no.
I think it's one. I think it's one L.
I don't
And
know.
I know.
I don't
Anyway,
also don't care.
if you get close, Google will fill it in for you. But yeah, Aleppo
I will go.
pepper.
I
So I'm
couldn't
go
help it.
so I'm
Just
going
think
to
about it.
so
Great.
Shannon, I might have to test your theory, right? Your assumption that that is the only pepper that I'm ever going to need if I
The
find
only
it.
red pepper flake.
Red pepper flakes. See, even more specificity.
Mhm.
All right, you guys. So with this, thank you, Shannon. And just a couple reminders again. Blair has a couple books out on Amazon. Highly recommend that you get your hands on it, especially if you caught this ending here talking about mindset theory and the 1%. You definitely want to get your hands on Ultimate Mind Hacking and Phobia Freedom Formula to figure out what that means and what a more effective way of thinking and being and behaving is with mind models. Also, Blair has a great opportunity for you to go even deeper with the things that we chat about here on Tuesday nights, because we do this experiential, we follow where the conversation goes, we prep a lot of material, but not everything makes it into our discussion. And so where that additional stuff lives is in the BDE Insider Notes, so the Blair Dunkley Experience Insider Notes, where you're going to get episode 318 to current, and we are again on 396, so there's a lot there. You'll also get the video that was played at the beginning, and there's also an audio excerpt where you're going to get a little bit of a podcast style experience as well. So highly recommend that you invest in yourself with the mind models and the BDE Insider Notes. $25 a month or $300 a year. You can scan the QR code on your screen to access any of those books, as well as to get signed up for the Insider Notes. Also, Blair has the Mind Mastery magazine QR code. The fourth one down on the left will get you access to that. It's a beautiful the PDF that will give you, again, more insight on how mind models can be used in your life. And we would invite you to join us back next week. We're here every single Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Mountain, 9 Eastern. You can go to rewiringthemind.com/weekly-webinar or scan the QR code in the right-hand corner of your screen if you're out there on YouTube. We would love to have you live with us in the room to be able to ask questions and participate. And with that, guys, we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. Do your practice. Notice how you and or others are making assumptions and deliberately challenge it by asking effective, curious questions, and then notice what your experience was. Bring it back next week so that we can discuss it. Have a wonderful rest of your day or night, wherever you're tuning in from, and we'll see you next week. Take care.